I don't mean to be controversial, yet when it comes to Shema, apparently I hold 4 opinions which to some people seem extremely controversial. The reason I'm talking about Shema this week is because it's in our Torah portion of Va'et Hanan, which is near the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy. And Shema has become very famous around the world throughout Jewish history, particularly ever since Rabbi Akiva recited it as the Romans were combing his flesh off his body. And so Shema becomes a statement that we say not just morning and evening, but also traditionally, it's the last words that we say. So what are my controversial opinions on Shema? Well, there are 4 of them, apparently. The first one is that Shema is not a prayer. Shema is a statement, a declaration. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, only Adonai. Or some people translate it, Adonai is one. A prayer is a form of dialogue. A prayer is a way of expressing something within ourselves or reaching out to God. Very often, not always, but very often our prayers are in the second person. Baruch atah Adonai. Blessed are you, Adonai. A prayer very often has that dialogue component. Shema has none of that. Shema is a biblical quotation. Moses is turning to the Israelites and saying, listen up, hear this, Israel. This is important. And so, in fact, for me, Shema is more like a declaration of faith than it is a prayer. Even though very often, because it's included in the prayer service, people call it a prayer, but to me it doesn't seem quite prayerful. To me it seems a sort of grounding and establishing this is who we're praying to and why. And it contains instructions. These are what you should do. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you walk in the street, when you lie down, and when you're at home, when you lie down, when you rise up. It's a statement as opposed to a prayer. And that's not to say that it's not important. Of course, Shema is essential. But my first, apparently controversial opinion is that Shema isn't actually a prayer. My second controversial opinion, apparently, is that Shema is not about belief in one God. Very often people would translate Shema, the first line of Shema, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Hear, O Israel, the Eternal is our God, the Eternal is one. But that's not actually much of a statement. I am one. You are one. What does it mean to be one? If we read it in the context of Torah, though, the rabbis read Shema as a monotheistic statement. A statement that God is one. There is only one God. But Torah very often is read as a henotheistic document, which is the belief that the other peoples have their gods, it's just ours is supreme. And so the rabbis read their monotheism back into the Torah and said it was always talking about Adonai is one, God is one. But you can read it another way. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Adonai is our God, only Adonai. That becomes a very different statement. I think it's a much more inclusive statement. It's a statement that says they have their gods, and we're not denying their gods, but they have their gods, we have ours, we think ours reigns supreme. The king above the king of kings was the old language that would be used to describe God, the ruler above all rulers. And why might I say that the Torah is henotheistic? For example, Micha mocha ba'ilim Adonai, who is like you among the gods, Adonai? Very often translated by later commentators as who is like you among the divine beings, the celestial beings, Adonai, meaning angels and so on. But the word is Elim, it's gods. Don't turn to other gods, Torah says a number of times. And the rabbis say, well, these are obviously false gods that don't exist. But it's very easy, I would say, to read Torah as a henotheistic document. They have their gods, we have our God. Our God is called Adonai. And so when we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, I believe what Shema is saying is, hear Israel, hear this. Adonai is our God and only Adonai. They have theirs, we have ours. My third opinion, and this one is apparently the most controversial, is there's no such thing as the V'ahavta. And this one really gets people, especially other clergy. And I've had really interesting discussions with colleagues, American colleagues, about this. In England, nobody used the phrase the V'ahavta. We'll read Shema, and then the V'ahavta is on the next page. And then we'd start singing V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, almost like a separate prayer. Traditionally, the first paragraph of Shema starts with Shema Yisrael and ends with Uvisharecha, ends with the end of what American Jews call the V'ahavta. And there's history behind this that I found out from some colleagues. The history is because some people would like to stand for Shema Yisrael, they'd stand for that part, but they wouldn't want to stand for the next part, for V'ahavta, which is a statement, you should love the eternal your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. And so it became often split. The congregation would sing the very opening line or two lines, and then they would sit and then would recite the next part. Traditionally, though, that's all the first paragraph of Shema. And so it's actually very interesting to hear a little bit of a cultural difference. And where does that come from? What does that do to our prayer? I actually think it makes a very important statement about our prayer and what it means to us, or about Shema, I should say, and what it means to us. You see how easy it is to call Shema a prayer, even when you've just said Shema is not a prayer. Because if we separate Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'elam Va'ed, Hear, O Israel, the eternal is our God and only the eternal. Blessed is the knowledge of God's glorious rule forever and ever. If we split that as a separate prayer from what follows, then I think we change the dynamic of the statement, the declaration of faith, because the declaration of faith leads to action. This is what you do with the consequence of what you just said. What you've just said is Adonai is our God, so what should you do with that? You should love Adonai our God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might, and you should place these words upon your heart and repeat them to your children, and so on. I believe it is one consistent unit, and that is how Judaism has traditionally understood Shema for thousands of years. It's only, interestingly, as far as we can tell, American Reform Judaism that split it off, and sometimes even only recited the first two lines, the Shema and then the very quiet response. Sometimes communities didn't even do the rest, or would read it in English. And so it felt like two different prayers or statements, and so the phrase V'ahavta appeared. And you actually see this, if you look in the Siddur, in Mishkan Tefillah, you see on the side, it actually has Shema as a pointer, and then on the next page it has V'ahavta. And that really led people to see them as two separate prayers, or two separate statements, whereas in fact traditionally they've always been one. And my final thought on Shema, which apparently is controversial to some, is that the Mishkan Tefillah missed an opportunity by providing the full Shema. And what do I mean by full Shema? There are in fact traditionally three paragraphs of Shema. The second paragraph, V'haya im shomoa tishma'u al mitzvotai, comes from Deuteronomy chapter 11. This will happen if you listen carefully to my commands, then God will open up the skies and give you your land rain at the right time. But if you don't, then terrible things happen to you. That's the traditional second paragraph of Shema. And the traditional second paragraph, I remember as a child, I remember my rabbi of blessed memory, he would read the first part, V'haya im shomoa tishma'u al mitzvotai, he would read that part, and then when it would get to the negative part, Hishamru lachem pen yiftach levavechem, take care that your heart isn't deceived into straying, he would recite that quietly. And I always remember as a child thinking, he's a rabbi, has he lost his place? Why is he so quiet right now? But it was in fact the custom. The traditional custom is to recite part of the second paragraph of Shema loudly, and then the negative part quietly. Since the Shoah, since the Holocaust, however, a lot of modern Jews feel a real problem with the second paragraph of Shema, because it's very easy to say God punishes those who don't follow God's ways. It's very easy to turn around and say, look what terrible thing has happened to those Jews. It must be their fault. They must have done something wrong, even though the book of Job very clearly demonstrates that's not the case. And so in American Reform Judaism, the second paragraph of Shema was taken out entirely from the Siddur. It was seen to be theologically unacceptable or problematic. And so what many Reform Jews consider to be the second paragraph of Shema, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe Lemor, with the tzitzit, with the tassels, is in fact the third paragraph of Shema, traditionally. And I do think that the editors of Mishkan Tefillah missed something by not providing it and saying, if a community doesn't like it, skip it. But provide the whole Shema, all the paragraphs of Shema, and give communities a choice. Give them a choice, a ritual choice that they can engage in. They can have a fascinating discussion. It's not too much of a labor to turn an extra page to say, our Shema continues on this page, if you don't want to just say, on the next page. So those are 4 opinions of mine on Shema. Firstly, that Shema is not actually a prayer. It's a statement, a declaration of faith, and an instruction on what we should do once we understand that statement of faith. My second belief is that Shema isn't actually about belief in one God, but is about belief in Adonai being our God only. The third is that there's no such thing as V'ahavta, that it's all the first paragraph of Shema, even if our Siddur splits it onto 2 pages. And my fourth, apparently controversial belief is that the entire Shema should be in the Siddur and communities should be given a choice whether to read that second paragraph or not. Because if it's not in the Siddur, then the editors have made a choice on behalf of all communities that nobody can read it unless you provide an insert, and no community is doing that. So, with all that in mind, I invite you to come and join us for Torah study tomorrow. Because we have a very large B'nai Mitzvah tomorrow, our Torah study is on Zoom only. It's not in person. So it's on Zoom only, so please have a look at the link. And the idea is to look at Shema and to ask ourselves, what does it mean? You may have heard my controversial opinions and thought, no, I disagree with Rabbi Neil. If so, bring that opinion. Bring that to our Torah study. Say, I'm sorry, Rabbi Neil, to me it is a prayer, and here's why. Or you may have heard my 4 controversial opinions and said, yes, actually, I agree with those. Bring that to our Torah study too. Share your opinion. We'll be looking at different commentaries on Shema itself to see what it means to us, and to see that it can mean many different things to many different people. So I do hope that you join us this evening. Aaron, Fred, and I are leading the service. It's wonderful to have different people helping lead the service, and especially Aaron and Fred, who I'll share musically just blow me away. We sit in the rehearsal, we have a quick rehearsal on a Wednesday, and the musical terms they throw about, and the way that they are able to say, well, how about we try it this way, and they remember, the musicality is extraordinary. And really deserves to be praised. And so I hope that you'll join us, Aaron, Fred, and myself, for our service this evening. And then I hope that you'll join us for our Torah study tomorrow, and then also for our B'nai Mitzvah afterwards. I wish you Shabbat Shalom.